All right, so in this particular case, I am going to walk really right from the very beginning. Um, and again, I'm going to look to the side every now and then to check if something is lagging or something's not working quite right. Please let me know, drop me a note, or maybe even drop me an email, because everything else is sort of off to the side screen here. But I want to start again because we didn't go too far into this in sort of the introductory tech talk, but I wanted to start at the very beginning with establishing a location. So the location tool is pretty simple. It works just like you would expect it to. So I'm just going to do, again, Springfield, Missouri as a location. One thing to note, I can switch between aerial photos and roads. My internet, unlike last time we did this, I'm running really fast today. I actually have a good LTE connection, so I can kind of do this hopefully much more gracefully today as this comes along. But I'm going to pan back to the same site on Commercial Street and then import satellite image. Zoom out just a little bit. I want a little bit of additional context. Make sure I'm getting the right location. There we go. And say finish importing. And again, this is going to bring in that base image at scale so I can work right over the top of it. But if I go back to my location tool set, one of the things that I have to work with that's super relevant are these weather stations. So wherever you're working out on a project, double checking these weather stations is incredibly important. So if I just zoom out, I'm going to start to see these little sunny, cloudy things that are located all the way around Springfield. So I've got 3 different locations that are reasonably close to the site to work with. And the advice that I've been given through the team with FormIt, as well as other talks that I've been in, are often about choosing the location that best represents your context. So in other words, if I zoom into this weather station that is, this is in the James River Valley. This is, if you know the terrain of Southwest Missouri, this is quite a bit hillier. This is going to have a more direct impact on wind flow, things like that, as opposed to thinking about Commercial Street, which is very flat. And it is, and not only is this closer, the weather station close to the airport, but the terrain is much more similar. So just sort of knowing what weather station you're selecting is incredibly relevant. If I click on the weather station itself, I also get additional data, which is really important. In particular, the thing that I like to look at most when I'm teaching this is the wind roses, which are going to show up right over here to the right. So in this case, if I pull up the annual wind rose for the airport, you can see almost all of the wind is coming out of the south. This does do a nice job of breaking it down even further. In particular, if I look at June and August, in particular thinking about, well, let's actually do March and May, times where I can start thinking about using a little bit of passive heating and cooling, I can really begin to zone in on what is happening with the wind at those specific times of the year, including if I go to December through February, what wind do I want to block? So really important information to be looking at, again, early on in the development of a project, and all available inside of this software, which is really nice. I'm not going through multiple sources to try and compile this. So it's something I'm always using to teach, especially second-year architecture students. We're really getting into looking at how these impact the designs and what we should be looking for. If I scroll over to, I think I just moved my site location on accident there. It's the little red dot. Oops, let's kind of drag that back to where it was supposed to be, 44. It's someplace over there. Let's zoom out. What I was trying to do is grab this other weather station. And again, looking at the difference in the windrows. So even though these are in the same general area, Southwest Missouri, all of the wind directions, it's definitely subtle in this case, but it's definitely shifting the wind direction to the side, more northwest, southeast wind flow, that kind of thing. So in some areas, that change is even more drastic. So it's just one of those additional pieces of information as you're starting the design process that you can be sharing with the client, again, raising your level of expertise. So all of that said, let's cancel this and let's go back into creating a massing model. So again, I'm just going to use the sketching tools. I'm going to be drawing on axis with Commercial Street. So I should be looking for the purple axis for perpendicular. And then I'm going to be using an inference snap to go ahead and make sure I'm building a rectangle. And then I'm going to pull that up. Let's do about 40 feet. And let's make that 2 levels. So I'm going to double click on my object and go to its properties and turn on use levels. So I really only want 2 levels in this case. And I'm going to set my second level right here at 20 feet. Just so I have 2, that's a little bit generous, obviously, but so I have 2 levels, each one 20 feet of space, level to level. So the last time we did this, we looked in particular at the sun simulation. This time we're going to look at the full energy modeling simulation, which is called an insight. So I'm going to click Generate Insight. And this has been working a bit randomly for me. And to be honest, it has a lot to do with the internet connection. So what Insight is looking for in particular, once I have given a massing model levels, Insight knows that this is a building. So if it does not have levels, it is not going to register. It is not going to become part of the simulation. So if I'm working on a more full context model, it's only going to take whatever has levels. So that's a really important thing to note as you're working through this. It knows, okay, I've got levels, I have specific architectural information to work with. This, like Chelsea, when we did Insight back in the day, there were a few things that we went in and prescribed even further, like the building types and things like that. And they've kind of reset that a bit anymore. Now, it's not really about building type. This is such early phase simulation that this is much more about, let's begin building some generic data based on standard buildings. As the building develops, then you're really moving into another tool set, Green Building Studio in particular, if you're in the Autodesk panel, to begin refining that data. This is just about getting some baseline information put together. So right now, essentially what's happened is it has uploaded this very simple model and it's started to run 30-year buildings energy simulations on that. And we'll take a look at that here in just a minute. Between now and then, I want to do a few more advanced modeling tools. In particular, the advanced geometry tools. So the first two, join and subtract, are pretty simple. These are your standard Boolean operations. So I'm not going to go into those. Sweep is also pretty simple. This is a path and a profile, and you're able to build off of that. The next two are ones that I find myself, even when doing simple massing work, come in really handy. So those are the two that I want to show really quick. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over this cover tool just by building a quick scenario where you might need to use cover. So I'm going to draw sort of just an odd shape here really quick, something less massing oriented. And then begin building. So I'm going with vertical lines on this. So I'm really watching for that blue axis. And again, I can hit the tab key and make sure I'm creating the same height for each one of these axes. And now I'm going to change my height for a few of them as well. but I am making sure that I'm on the blue axis so all of these lines are vertical. And this is the way a lot of times we find students like to work, especially when you're learning modeling, is this is more of a drafting approach. I'm really drawing lines to make surfaces so that I can be, well, I certainly don't want to say I want to be more creative, but what I can do with something like this is I'm piecing things together in a more abstract way, right? So I've got this kind of model coming together, and it has not created, it's created a surface for the base. It has not created a surface for the top. And the reason why is this top edge, all of these points are not coplanar. So if all of these were the exact same height, when I closed this out, it would make a top surface. Since I don't have a top surface, I've got a couple of options. I can sort of longhand my way through it and begin building triangles out of this, which, in this particular case isn't so bad, I suppose, right? But there are a lot of times where we have a much more complicated model than that. And that's where this cover tool comes in very handy. So I'm just going to launch cover, and this says select edges to be enclosed. So just really quickly, I can select, or I can even lasso select all of those edges, checkbox, and it gives me an immediate and simple cover for all of them. So in particular, this also works really nicely to close in gaps. If I'm doing some 3D printing and things like that, a lot of times you'll have a hole someplace, and this allows you to select the edges that surround that hole and then close that off so that you have a watertight piece of geometry. So the next modeling tool, which is really handy in this sort of advanced suite, is lofting. So lofting, I can create some complex geometry forms with lofting. And I'm sure that that has some really good use to it. But what I see happening most often with this tool at school is when I have a hard copy topography plan, and I can scan that and bring that in as a backdrop. This allows me to really quickly use a spline and trace out the contours, move them to the correct elevation, and then create topography geometry from that, and create really some very accurate topography geometry from that. So that's sort of what I want to walk through with this conceptually. So I'm just going to use the Spline tool and draw out a series. You can imagine, if you could, me tracing over a scanned in topography drawing, something like that. And then I'm going to take this line, so I'm just selecting that line, and then I'm going to move it vertically 20 feet. So I'm looking for that blue axis. I'm going to select the next line and move it vertically 40 feet. So I have those three lines staggered now. And so I can launch the loft tool. I can select my edges. Oh, I guess that is, let me back up here. That you select one edge at a time so it knows the order in which to do the lofting. So it says select a face or an edge. So selecting that, the second edge, and the third edge. And that way it knows how to put the loft together. And I get this. And there's a little bit of an error in there, just sort of, I think I got these two lines a little bit too close together. So I need to go back and edit that just a little bit. But you get the idea in terms of how it begins to piece those together, which is really, really handy. Like I said, especially in this early development for generating a topography file. So the next thing that I'm going to do is a collaborative modeling session. And so Matt Hassick has volunteered or been voluntold to kind of do this with me. And I want to walk through that. And this is something I don't know how much this is getting used professionally. But this is one of those things that if I was teaching the correct studio, in other words, if I wasn't teaching first year, I would have used this a great deal this last spring academically. I did use it on occasion in the Introduction to Digital Design class that I teach. But the idea is this is a collaboration tool that I can have multiple people modeling in the same workspace. So what I'm going to do with this is this collaboration tool right here. I'm going to say start collaboration session. And from here, I can click start session. Let's see, or do I need to do this? It might be that I need to do this in the online version. So each one's a little bit different. How I'm set up, I might need to actually open up this file in the online version. We'll see here. I'll give this just a second here. And if this doesn't work exactly like I think it's going to. Oh yeah, no, there we go. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this to the clipboard. So that's simply creating a link from my version of FormIt here. And then I'm going to switch over to my email, which has been pinging in the background. Sorry about that. Let's go to Matt, and I'll get this emailed over.
Hey, Dave, can you actually send it to my email address? We're working on my computer.
Got it. It's coming to both of you.
Okay.
Oh dear, copied the wrong thing. I need to open this back up. I hit copy and then I copied Matt's email. So let me start this back up one more time here. So essentially, we have had, just as an experiment, we had up to 30 people at one point modeling in the same space, which was kind of exciting. It was complete chaos, but it works. So, to do 2, 3, or 4 people is pretty easy. I'm anticipating more things coming online with this, with FormIt, in terms of viewing, because again, FormIt is something that the strategy that I would really begin thinking about with this is I could have a client that runs FormIt in Google Chrome without a license, without any problem. And what happens with that then is I could actually use this to navigate them around a 3D model as a shared collaborative space. I certainly wouldn't want them making edits or things like that, but it would certainly be an interesting way if I'm working with a client and we're not in the same space to be able to navigate and share with them certain parts of the design. So let's try this one more time. This link should be coming across. And essentially, Matt, you should just be able to follow that link and it should be able to give you direct access into the FormIt model. So Kate and Matt, you guys can just tell me, when you've gotten the link. It's coming through Jury's email, which isn't always the fastest. In fact, I would say it's more like the slowest. But as soon as that comes through, you should be able to have a direct link and direct access inside of the model. So again, the idea that this is something that you could use with the client, or if we're in sort of this remote kind of process, again, this is something that is a very likely scenario to work collaboratively inside of the same space, to do markups, to hash out ideas together in the same space at the same time. We're working right now with leveraging virtual reality and sort of where Twinmotion is going with being able to do that as well. Multiple headsets, different locations, and sort of the shared space, which is really an interesting way for me to teach. I don't know that it's the future of doing architectural presentations at all, but I think it is going to be a tool that we can certainly use. Matt and Kate, how's it going over there?
Took the link, but it took me to a blank template.
Okay, well, I'm going to bring over, and let's do this in a slightly different format then. I do have the online version open, so that everybody should sort of see a blank screen now, and it's a little bit more seamless in this version, really. Oh, I think I need to log in first here. 1 second. I'm sorry to take some time on this, but it is definitely worth showing if you haven't seen how this works yet. So let's just try this. I'm going to go start collaboration session, and you guys should be able to see this is a little bit more instantaneous. So what I'm going to do, so that is desktop labs for iPads with the session ID. Yeah, I think this is the one we want to send right here. I'm going to go send email. I really didn't want to go send email. It's probably going to bring up Outlook, which I don't have open. Oh, come on. Yay for live demos. Apply. Let's try that. And then I'm also going to send the second link as well. So the second link, Matt and Kate, you can input this code if you just go to the collaboration tool. You should be able to put in this code, 31C846E6, if you go to the collaboration button here, where you can go join a session. And so that, Kate, that email should be coming through to you here in just a second. While that's happening, let's see here. We will multitask. So the simulation should be done. Yeah, it is. So back into this original file, I can go to View Insight, and that's going to open up another tab, yet another tab on my web browser. Yay for more tabs. Let's go ahead and drag that in while we're getting that collaboration session up and going. So this is a super simplified version of seeing your core building energy data. First of all, you have a benchmark comparison using ASHRAE 90.1. So this is sort of where we are at. Looking at ASHRAE 2030, this is setting up the goal of, at 2030, what we think ASHRAE is going to be at that time. And so this essentially gives you a benchmark to work toward 1 decade out. So each of these things give you different ideas on what is impacting energy use with the building. And it starts with building orientation. So I can flip that over, and this is a essentially I modeled a box. So rotating the building around is not going to have much of an impact at all. So you can see that very little, if I change the shape of the building or which side of the building has the most glazing, that will start to update and change and modify. From there, I'm certainly not going to go through all the panels, but let's just look at some of the ones that have a bigger impact. So solar shading, on the south side, again, you can see the baseline is none. And we start to see some minimal differences. Again, larger windows, you're going to see a bigger impact, as well as looking at the type of glass. And again, we're seeing sort of minor bumps. So 0 as a baseline, and then triple low E glazing. And what we're looking at is a cost savings in this place when we get to the negative values of 35 cents per meter squared per year. So again, in terms of early on understanding of what you're doing, what you want to share with the client, that is what's starting to build value in your expertise, value in what products you're working with, those kind of things, not as a definite, but as an understanding of where the design is heading early on. Scrolling further down, some things that make larger impacts, like the wall construction and roof construction. So, the baseline here versus an R60. And this is based off of regional data, right? So this is using the local weather stations. And I believe the default, I believe this is used as an office building type. I think that is the default that this is being looked at. So if you change building types, it will change the building data, but that's something that, again, isn't really available yet in this stage. That's where you're getting into Green Building Studio and more advanced simulation. Daylighting controls and lighting efficiency, you see some big jumps, both in the wrong direction if you're not really optimizing the lighting and the types of lighting used. Operating schedule, I've always liked going over this with students to remind them that people in the building is really one of the most massive cost factors, as well as the HVAC systems. That's not to say that we can do whatever the hell we want with Windows, but people and comfort zones, maintaining comfort zones, are really one of the largest impacts that we have. So yeah, let's go back to Kate and Matthew and see if you guys have, yeah, so Kate's logged in, which I'm assuming is actually Matt. And so Matt, like model away on something. And so what you're seeing is sort of Matt's modeling cylinder over here, while Matt is modeling cylinder over here. I can be modeling apparently weird triangle-y stuff on my side of things. And we're essentially working same place, same time. I'm the one that has control over saving, I think. If Matt saves, I'm not sure exactly what it does. But ultimately, it comes back around to my machine. And so this is something that, again, can be really handy in terms of working through things. I know this is something that I have been starting to use with students in the right studios. Based on how the fall goes, I'll probably be using this quite a bit more as I'm teaching either the second year or third year studios. So these are tool sets that they'll already be actively using in the design studio for me to help them along with. So really, really cool feature in terms of how this works. And again, being out of practice for a while, I don't know how much I would use it, but it's really interesting. I like everybody in the profession to know that it's there so they can start to see what they could be doing with it. Because it's a thing, right? And doing this as a collaborative session is definitely a thing. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, so next thing. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Kate. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Sorry that didn't work first go through. What I would say is it seems like the online version, well, and it's probably, not probably, it is me, right? I've used the online sharing much more than I have the offline version of FormIt. So this was, the sharing that we did was right here out of the Chrome web browser in terms of getting that working. So let me go ahead and minimize that and minimize this. And let's get back into this base model that I was using. And let's crack open Dynamo. So Dynamo, the quick talk that I always like to give on Dynamo in particular is this is a bit like driving a car at its base. So there are going to be people that are really good with cars and know how to break down an engine and rebuild it. And that's not me. But I do know, like when I'm driving a car, I do know that when I put my key in the ignition and turn it, that it starts. And if it doesn't start, if it goes, you know, that's probably the battery. If it's not the battery, it's probably the starter. So I can at least do some basic troubleshooting. I don't know how to change the oil in my car. I probably should, but I know that I should do that. So I know the basics, right, of how a car operates so I can operate it safely and I can operate it hopefully well. You do not have to know how to write visual scripting to begin using Dynamo. Okay, how they have Dynamo plugged into sort of this Autodesk ecosystem, both Revit and FormIt, are that people are publishing these amazing Dynamo scripts like crazy, and they are available to find and download and install. So there are some base ones that are already installed right here that come prepackaged in FormIt. Next week, we'll go over finding where to find and where to download them, how to get them installed. Today, I just want to show some of the basic ones so you can get a feel for how they work. And we're not even going to open Dynamo today. We're just going to look at how they run within FormIt, because essentially they don't show you the visual scripting, but they show you the options that are built into the visual script. So in other words, if I have something in the visual script that creates a variable, I will see only those variables inside of FormIt to work with. So one of the most useful ones, again, one of the ones that I see students jump onto right away is column grid. So if I work with this column grid script, and essentially all that I'm doing is dragging and dropping that out, I'm going to left click and place it. I now have a really simple column grid, but this column grid is dynamic based on the script that was created inside of Dynamo. Okay, so the script has these variables. The X bay size, the bay count, Y bay size, Y bay count, the column width, column length, and column height. Grid lines, do I even want them on? Columns, do I want them on? Rectangular or circular columns. So right now, these are square columns. I can change that to false, and they will all become a circular column once I click Run Modified Script. So essentially, these always take a minute to update. I shouldn't say a minute. They take a couple of seconds to update. And that way, what I can do is I can make multiple changes. So like, let's say my XBay size, I need that at 20. My XBay count is also going to be 20. My the Y is going to be 40. And the count is going to be 10. And my column height is going to be 20 feet. So I can do all of those things and click Run, and it's going to automatically update everything within that. So I now have this completely new column grid set up. So I can sit there and make changes and tweaks with this, and they run continuously. I can open this back up in Dynamo as well and continue to customize it as I might need to. And we will cover that next week. But the really interesting thing with this is all of these different things that are available: ramps, stairs, storefronts, louvers. But then once you get into digging through the library of content, there are a bunch of these that essentially, again, go back to this idea of operating a vehicle. There are a lot of things that if I'm thinking I really like a script to be able to help me model this particular aspect of a building design, more than likely you're not the only person who's thought of that. You can probably find that script. And not unlike driving a car, if you know just the basics of it, you're going to be able to leverage those scripts that other people have already done and published and bring them in to sort of optimize your modeling process. So this is something that's really been folded nicely into FormIt. If you've used Grasshopper and Rhino, it does the same. It's the same kind of philosophy, but you actually don't have to get too far into the weeds of, Rhino really, you have to get into the weeds of running Grasshopper and knowing how to work it. This, you don't really even need to know Dynamo. You only need to know that it exists to begin working with these different scripts. I would encourage everybody. That said, visual scripting is a thing. I mean, it is definitely coming. And what I like to call with the visual scripting is it really is kind of a gateway drug to artificial intelligence, generative design tools, those kind of things. They're starting, almost all of them that are out, that are starting to come out, both through Rhino, through Fusion, through Revit. They're all leveraging the visual scripting at their core. And AI is one of those, artificial intelligence in design, generative design is really one of those things that has the chance to run over architecture and have a negative impact on what we do, or it's something that we get out in front of and really begin to leverage it and have some expertise in it so that we can really elevate our work and what we're doing, elevate our expertise. And so I'm really encouraging everybody that it's one of those times in the history of the industry that I think, for those of you that have been around me for a while, I'm a big proponent of VR. I think it's super cool and I think it's awesome. And I think it's changing the way we teach. I think it's going to change the way we communicate. I don't think it is nearly as impactful as what artificial intelligence is going to do in the design community. It's one of those boats that we can't miss. Historically speaking, and yes, I'm on my soapbox and I kind of apologize, but kind of not. We, in a way, missed an opportunity to navigate into 3D modeling in the 1980s. When engineering and industrial design went in the direction of 3D, we went in the direction of 2D drafting with AutoCAD. And although AutoCAD's a great product and it certainly has helped us in production, it did limit our thinking and our expertise into the 2D world rather than the 3D world. Industrial design and engineering, they are already using artificial intelligence in their design. They're already using generative design. We as an industry are not into it yet as a de facto standard. We need to get there quickly because those are industries that, not unlike in the 1980s, that left us behind a little bit in terms of going into 3D early on and being early adopters of that. If we're not on board with that, we have a really good chance that we're going to get set back another 2 or 3 decades in our level of expertise if we are not part of the development and creation of that as a tool. And it's ready, it's out there. So hopefully, if all goes as planned, we'll be looking at that just a little bit next week, getting a little bit further into Dynamo next week, what these are. And then we're also going to add, we're going to start a little bit with leveraging 3D printing. I think that was on tap for today, but I cut it because I thought that we might be running a little bit long. Oh, I do have one more thing to cover today. Yeah, and that's imagery, output of imagery. So let's take a quick look at that, and then that's where we'll close up, and I'll be happy to take any questions, things like that. So just going to use this row of columns here really quick. It's kind of cool. To go to the image tab, so I'm going to the camera, and I am going to zoom in on this to set a specific angle. So I've created a new scene, basically. I'm going to name this column view 1. So let's create a new one. More of an overhead kind of view of all of this stuff. And on this one, let's definitely turn on shadows. Get a little bit more depth. There we go. Name this column view 2. And I need to hit the update scene to make sure that it has recorded that location. So now I can go through both of these views that I have. So that's how I begin to set an update. I can go to my visual styles and do some things. Well, hello, there's my cat. Wow. It's nice to see you, Snicks. Down you go. Not as dramatic as Heather's cat last week. That was awesome. But I can go to my visual styles, and I can definitely add in a few things. Like if I go to edge styles, I can do the sketchy edge thing and extend edges and begin looking at this. It's going to show up quite a bit better on this solid object here than it will the columns, just by how they're modeled. But I can do all of those different types of things to set up what I want. There is a section tool that works as well right here. I don't really have anything dramatic to show with that, but essentially a lot of the things that you find in SketchUp in terms of being able to set up these early visuals are very available. Let's do one more. Let's create that one right there too. Column view 3. Oops. 3. Refresh. So now I have these 3 different views. So I can use those to create an animation if I want to. So it is going to pull through and go from view to view to view automatically for me. Or at any of these specific views, let's go back into this view 1 right here. I can also output. I can go to File, Export. In this case, I'm going to export locally. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to export an image. And then this is where I can set up the preview, which is my viewport, my resolution. And then when I export, it's simply going to save that as column view 1. Save. It's going to save that as an image file directly onto my computer, so I can share that outside of FormIt. And that is actually the last thing that I wanted to show today in terms of getting files out. Unlike SketchUp, it doesn't have a lot of tools for layout, creating plan views, things like that. They are kind of available. I can switch from perspective to more of an orthographic style of projection. And when I have that, I can go to a view and then a top view, so I can get plans, things like that. But it is not as, let me just say, it's not really designed for that. This is designed for volumetric thinking and then basic output of those views, right? So it's less about creating plans, sections, and elevations, and more about the sort of volumetric thinking. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share and unmute everybody. Oh, Newman, thank you for wanting to teach me. Yes, we will do a little bit about Dynamo, but I am not going to teach you enough for you to know Dynamo. And I would encourage you to like try and teach me how to change my oil. That will be challenging. I am not mechanically inclined, man. Not at all. I'm much better with the mouse. But thanks for the offer. I will take you up on it sometime, especially if it's on your motorcycle. You still have the motorcycle?
Actually, no. I sold it, and I plan on getting a better one. So.
Oh, okay. Well, when you get the better one, I'll come over. I do not want to learn how to ride it, but I will be happy to learn how to change oil on it. That would be awesome.
I was gonna say I actually own his motorcycle now.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So, other than oil changing questions, if there's anything out there that you guys might have questions on, let me know. Otherwise, I will say, have a good Friday, everybody, and have a great weekend. You can certainly drop me questions via email, and I'll be happy to do my best to cover those. Next week, same time, we're going to get a little bit into looking at Dynamo. Like I said, if all goes as planned, because blunt to the point, the generative design tools are things that I'm trying to learn and stay on top of as well. It is really challenging for me to try and wrap my head around sort of this new world and where it's going. Talking to programmers who say, well, yeah, at some point in time, you're just going to be curating design. And I kind of I don't know if I like those words or not. So I'm really trying to get moving to a point where I can begin using this as a tool to teach. So I'm hoping to have a little bit of that next week. I can certainly share with you where I'm at and what I have, and hopefully that'll be of use. And then I'll definitely show a little bit about Dynamo, how I'm using it to teach in terms of the basics, that again, sort of help you get to that level of understanding how the program works and how you can start to at least leverage the existing scripts. So yeah, everybody, thanks a lot. Like I said, have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. Take care. And we'll catch up next week. Yeah. Okay.
Matt just had a question a couple minutes ago about Inkscape and FormIt. I don't know if you know anything, but I did a quick Google search and it sounds like they're working on it because offices are moving towards FormIt and away from SketchUp.
Yeah. I mean, so this is like where I stop the recording here because I don't want to get in trouble